Welcome to the Forging Honor podcast. I'm Jonathan George.
And I'm Benjamin Jones. Here at The Forge, we explore what it means to live as Christian men. Along the way, we'll be doing challenges, building habits and character through action.
In today's episode, we talk about ritual versus habit, how ritual connects us to responsibility, and then the ritual of sports, and some of our favorites, including cross country. All right, it is challenge check-in time. As a reminder, challenges last for 6 weeks. That's 42 days total. They're simple daily tasks to grow us as men. And the current challenge is to engage in some form of a daily ritual, in theory, to connect you to the responsibility you have in your life. But we can talk about how that is going. Banjo, how are you doing? How has the challenge gone over the last week?
It's been going well for me. 5 out of 5 this week. This week in particular, I tried messing around with one of the things I noticed in the research is that the particular things that you use in a ritual are important. So if you change one of the elements, so to speak, or the order in which you do it, that can really mess up the ritual, and it will lose sort of some of its significance. And so I tried that in a couple of different ways this week. Tried substituting some different things out of my rituals, and it really did mess me up. It really did kind of like throw me for a loop. I was doing my writing ritual, which I normally do with the beer later in the afternoon. I moved it to earlier in the day, and I used coffee. And it did not have the same effect. It really kind of like I was like, something is wrong here.
What I'm hearing is Banjo needs alcohol.
Well, hopefully not. But you know, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt. Let's just say
the point is well made.
Anyway, so it messed up the rhythm of the ritual, and because of that, that day's writing experience was, I'd say, significantly different. It was different from what I was intending. So that was just an interesting little experiment. So how about you? How's it going this week?
Well, first off, total sidebar, and I'm going to throw this out there and then not allow any actual response and just get on with my life. Have you heard the theory that the Enlightenment was caused because of the discovery of the Americas, which led to the discovery of coffee?
I have not heard that theory.
All right, and moving on. I make no claims as to its truth, dear listener. It's just a fun theory.
Pretty sure that's not true, but okay, yeah. Anyway, moving on.
Anyway, so for me, I would say, let's see, you did 5 out of 5, so you're only counting the 5 main days of the week. In that case, I would be 4 out of 5, or I guess 6 out of 7, if counting the full 7 weeks or 7 days. Excuse me. And yeah, I think you're exactly right. Just to kind of get into that point a little bit about the object you use or the thing you use, I do think there's something to that. I don't know how much of that is because our bodies become accustomed to certain things. Like if I used a different tool to shave my face, I would probably be very distracted the first several times.
You use like a straight razor.
It's not a straight razor. It's a safety razor.
Oh, a safety razor.
So actually, straight razor is something I aspire to, but we're not there yet. They cost a lot of money. But the safety razor, I mean, there's a whole routine to it. And that's been enjoyable. But then on top of that, the other thing I've noticed is over the last couple of weeks, as I'm thinking about this challenge, kind of noticing what are other things in my life that might be categorized as rituals, even if I don't do them regularly.
Right.
And then thinking about, are they habits or are they rituals, or are they just something I've sort of thought of them as habits and or rituals? I don't know. It's early. We're recording this pretty early in the morning, so I'm struggling to think of my examples off the top of my head. But
well, can I toss one in there for myself? So one thing that I was like, oh, this is a ritual for me. This last week is I had a cigar one of these days, and I realized that I have a ritual whenever I smoke a cigar now, at least for where I live. When I do, I live maybe a half mile from the Susquehanna River, and so whenever I smoke, I walk down to the river, and I sit at the river at a particular spot and sit and smoke, and then turn around and walk back. I know the stages of the cigar that I need to be
Mm-hmm.
at along the way, and I walk the same route to get there. And I don't want to see any people while I'm doing that. So
Sure.
if people like come out, I'll kind of like take a side street. And so like these are all like they're little things, but I realize like my cigar enjoyment is disturbed if those things don't happen.
So
And
does
it's
that make it a ritual, or is that a habit? And that's my question. Like those,
so
you could call a lot of that a habit. Like I'm the same way, or I'm similar with, say, my pipe smoking, or I'm
right,
similar with, like, if I'm pouring a beer, I have a way I pour a beer.
right.
I don't know. I'm just thinking of things now, but or like I have a way I like to make my coffee. I have a way I like to mow my lawn, and I
Yes,
don't like that
yes,
getting interrupted. But all
yes.
those habits, or are those rituals? That's what I'm asking.
Well, I think it depends. I think going back a couple episodes, Dave Walker's question about motivation is important on this level. So, in my mind, I could be wrong about this because, again, it's early in the morning and we're speaking off the cuff. But in my mind, a habit is basically something that it's ingrained and you do it without thinking. A
That makes
ritual,
sense.
a ritual is a habit that you do with intention, and that's why I tossed in the caveat about like responsibility at the beginning, which is like, so I'm taking responsibility of this habit. I recognize that this is a habit that I normally do without thinking, but I'm gonna do it, and
Hmm.
I'm gonna I'm gonna recognize my agency in this matter, and recognize the significance of everything in it. So I too have a beer pouring ritual, in that I have like there's a particular glass that I like to use, and then there's like the way that I pour it, and a little thing at the end, uh, and if I don't do that, something feels off. But I'm doing it because not that it does anything magical, and not that there's any like scientific measurement to like this is the most scientifically correct way to pour a beer. It's just that like I want to think about it, I want to enjoy it, I
Right.
want to savor it, and I think that's maybe what makes it I'm taking responsibility for it. I think that's what makes it a ritual.
That's an interesting interpretation. That goes a little bit to some of, as we've talked a little bit about since our last episode, um, some of what Bryce had to say about liturgy and ritual. Um, and just so there was one particular question I had that we've talked about this a little bit already, so I'm kind of asking you to recap some of that. But there was one question where I wasn't entirely sure that I felt like it was the answer I was looking for necessarily. Um, and that was I asked Bryce a question about, okay, so how do we take some of these rituals, some how do we take something and how do we gear it towards something like responsibility, right? And the impression I got was that that misses the point a little bit, and that the a ritual is more of a spiritual activity. Um, Now, it's been a week since we recorded that episode, and it's been a couple days since I listened through the episode recently, or most recently. But um, I was curious to know what you thought about that, Banjo, and I kind of know already because we have talked about this. But just for the sake of working through it again.
Of getting it on the record, yeah. Yeah, so the way that I was understanding Bryce's comments and appreciated him coming on and enjoyed our conversation there, but the way that I understood what he was saying about a ritual is, it's kind of the difference between, um, let me say this right, the level of a ritual's um, efficacy, to use a fancy word, has to do with the level of responsibility that someone's putting into it, and so that's how we practice the responsibility. In other words, the ritual becomes like a training ground for responsibility, and that's the practical application of it in that sense. So,
But I guess my question with that though is like, is responsibility, is that the point of any ritual, or is that the application in this particular case when we're thinking about responsibility?
I
Because like
I
in
would
one
say
sense,
it's the
is
case
there
of
a
any.
generic ritual, right?
Is there a generic ritual? That's a good question, actually. I don't know what it. I mean, I'm thinking of sacrifice is like the default ritual. Like, uh,
That's also partly liturgy. So that's ritual and liturgy tied together.
right. But I think I'm okay with that because I don't think that you can have ritual apart from some degree of uh, almost worship. Like, there's the ritual element in culture is almost always around like kind of a making something holy in a sense. Even if it's in a secular setting, it's like and I'm thinking like a sporting event. Like we have rituals with sporting events. So like
Right.
we have the flyover with the fancy fighter jets, and then we have the please stand for the pledge of for the national anthem, and then you have the throw out the first pitch. Like there's a ritual to the opening of a baseball game.
So is that uh, when you say making it holy, you mean more like
Set apart.
not set apart, not in any spiritual sense.
Right, not in any spiritual
This is
sense.
just separate from everyday life.
Yeah, we're just saying like when you go to a ball game, there's some sense of like for these 3 hours, you're apart from the rest of the world. Nothing else matters. It's just here, and those elements of ceremony are part of that. And baseball is a good example because there's ceremony all throughout the sport. Um, but even still, that's a secular event with no religious implications. I still think that there's a sense of responsibility there. Take for example, like the singing of the national anthem in that, right? Everybody needs to stand. Everybody needs to take their hats off and give their full attention to that. And many people will sing. They're engaging in they're recognizing their agency in that moment. And I think the more that you engage in that ritual, the more that you take that ritual seriously, you take responsibility of that ritual, then you'll enjoy it, and I think you enjoy the game more. Like I think you'll just be part of that world in a better way.
That makes sense what you're saying. My question would be, is it truly responsibility, or could everything you just said be subbed in as buy-in?
Um, and not in the way that I'm understanding it. I mean, I would say responsibility is like a bigger part of buy-in. I mean, if you want to say that responsibility is the concept of like buying into the agency in your life, maybe.
Well,
Um,
because it seems to me that a 10-year-old participating at one of these sporting events where there is a large sporting ritual taking place, I don't disagree that that's a ritual to setting apart. I just wonder, like, do they feel that responsibility, or are they simply, is it enabling a bit of a buy-in to the whole process? Like,
well, you
you
would
know,
have to. A child would have to be educated on that responsibility.
well, and
They might.
that's where I wonder. I think the ritual might be able to be separated a little bit from the responsibility, which then leads me back to my earlier question about if it can be separated at all. How do we know when we're doing
Well,
our little rituals
well,
in
I
this
would say
challenge that
in
they're part of that?
it's just in the same way that like, what's a sacrament? A kid is not going to understand what a sacrament is,
Oh, so
which is a
rituals are
ritual.
sacraments. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Well, I
Well,
mean, kind
sacraments are sacraments themselves.
sacraments
Rituals are not sacraments.
are
Sacraments are
sacraments
rituals.
are rituals, and I would
Yes.
say that in a secular sense, like in the sense that a sacrament is something being made holy, a ritual is a sacrament of sorts. It's not a sacrament of the Christian religion,
Oh, that
but
makes sense. Yeah, yeah.
but it is sacramental. And so, but a child is not going to understand what a sacrament is. As far as the child is concerned, this is a thing we do Maybe because we're Christians, we take the Lord's Supper
Right.
until the child is educated, and then the meaning of the symbols take on greater significance. And I think that's what I think that's what a ritual is. I think if we're going to do a lot of things in our day-to-day rituals that a lot of people are going to be like, why does that matter? Why do you do it that way? That's not significant. That has no meaning until you explain it. You say, well, no, I do it this way because, and then you're educating them on what the significance of that ritual is. And you're showing them like why and how you're taking responsibility in that measure.
So you're using the phrase "taking responsibility." Is that the same thing as growing in our responsibility and highlighting our responsibility?
Is that the same? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Well, I'll speak for myself this week. I'll take my French press coffee making as an example.
A wonderful little ritual. If
It's a
ever there was
wonderful
one.
little ritual. There is a world of difference to me in the way that I make that cup of coffee, that French press cup of coffee. World of difference between that and my drip coffee. But I've actually begun to recognize that I have there is a ritual to the way I enjoy my drip coffee too. And there's a series of steps that I have there, and taking time on doing the French press has made me slow down and go, oh, wait, okay, so if I do it this way, and if I do it this way, and I do it this way, I get the most enjoyment out of this thing. This series of events lose any sense of randomness, and everything has a telos, everything has a purpose, everything has a direction. I can take that same logic and apply that to my drip coffee maker, which I've started to do, and I've started to enjoy that cup of coffee more, because I go, oh, well, there's a whole process of like cleaning it out, and then getting the beans out, and making the cup and pouring and putting in a little sugar in. Even the way that I put the sugar in, I'm like, well, there's a way that I like to do that. And then that has started to expand to the rest of my life. Like, the way that I am driving. What do I do while I'm driving? What do I do while I'm listening to music? Where do I listen to my music? Like, just recognizing that in my life there's so much more significance and opportunity for intentionality, I think. Also, well, I won't go into that. Yes, but
on that note, though, I really like that word, intentional, and how these little rituals in our lives can highlight where we can be more intentional. I think, and this might be something to explore, kind of in our wrap up a little bit. I think I'm still just struggling to make that connection between ritual as a definition with responsibility as a definite, as we're talking about them. I'm still not entirely sure that what I'm doing is necessarily actually helping me grow in my responsibilities.
So what do you
the
mean by
intentionality,
responsibilities?
totally. I think I'm more talking in terms in generalities of to be a responsible human, to be a responsible man.
What does that mean? What is a responsible man? You've used the
Man who takes
word and the
ownership.
definition. Ownership. Okay.
I think ownership is, part of it, right?
Totally.
I think ownership. I do like the word intentionality, which might be a part of it. I think initiative. I also think that right thought and careful thought are a part of that as well.
Yeah.
So I without having a Webster definition in front of me, that's kind of
I like that. So if I could,
sure,
take the French press then.
Yep.
What I'm trying to say with a ritual is that at my without a ritual, I take no ownership of this event. I'm just saying whatever the instructions were on the box, I'm going to do that. I don't really care how that gets done. I'm just going to kind of diddle my way through it, and then we're going to get it done. With a ritual, I say, okay, I'm going to take ownership of the next 10 minutes. And basically for every minute, I'm going to have some significant thing that I'm doing.
That makes sense. I don't disagree with that, actually.
Yeah.
That you might be taking responsibility over that moment.
And so it's ownership of every moment by moment in that ritual, and saying, I'm going to own this moment. This moment has significance. I'm going to own this moment. This moment has significance. I'm going to own this, and so on down the line. And what ends up happening is, by the time you reach the end, by the time you get to that cup of coffee, there's so much more ownership over the beverage in your cup,
Mm-hmm.
that I think that whole experience gives so much more experience, or so much more significance to you. And then from that kind of richer experience, I think you can go to the rest of your life and say, okay, how do I apply what I've learned here in this ritual of taking ownership of every moment? And how do I apply that to the way I drive my car, to the way that I read my Bible, to the, and all of those things combined together, they should be always pointing us back to worship. I think there's a great point that Bryce
Right.
made, that what ritual is designed to do is to send our whole body back into worship of God. And I think as if we're designing rituals for ourselves, designing these ownerships of moments, that should always send us back into worship of God.
Makes sense. I understand what you're saying, and it all makes sense. And I absolutely agree with the final point that all of it should lead to worship. Um, there might just be a few little, and this might be my own problem rather than anyone else's. A few little definitional things and a few little, just some of the concepts that we're kind of mushing together. I'm going, wait, should that be mushed there? Or, in our little,
Sure.
if we had a little Play-Doh man, I'm like, I don't know if that quite goes there, or if it goes somewhere else. But I think at the end of the day, we're making the same point, which is, where should it lead us to? I think I'm asking questions with how does it do that? And you have a very nice answer. I'm just not quite sure I agree, but I'm not sure if I have a better alternate right now either. So I'm not going to go there.
Fair enough.
At any rate, we are getting close to time, but there was one particular question I liked that you asked from Bryce, which was about the pre-race rituals of different cross-country teams.
Indeed, yes.
So I thought it'd be interesting to explore that just for a moment, and kind of what your impressions were, because we had very different answers a week ago on the show about kind of what we thought of some of that, and like where we were in terms of thinking about it as a team versus solo sport. So I was curious to know if you thought about that anymore, and what your thoughts were on the subject now.
Well, just a little bit. I actually wrote an article for the blog, for the Forging Honor blog. Folks can check out. I don't know if it's been published yet, but we'll get that up soon. That was about one of our cross country rituals at Covenant, JJ. So I have been thinking about it some, and I do think there's two kinds of rituals that I think are important. One is kind of like the individual ritual, which I really enjoy coming up with. I mean, JJ knows how intense I was about those rituals with the movie and the night before and coffee in the morning and all this stuff. And all of that was designed very self-consciously to be about me and getting my mind right. And as I got older, it was less about firing me up and more about like calming me down. But the ritual of like the team, I loved those rituals because that was what made it feel to me like this is a brotherhood. Like this is what we're doing together. And so I see a two-part function of ritual. One is internal to kind of steady our own steering, and the other is to like, in some ways, this is going to be maybe a little intense language, but to bind souls together and to say like all of us are moving in the same direction. And so I think when I think about the moments that I love most in my college experience, often those rituals is what come to mind, because those were the moments where I felt most bonded to these other guys. I don't know.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think that's awesome, and I would say my experience is much the same. the I was, I've been curious to think about it in terms of on that more intense note a little bit, like, why does it do that, and
Yeah.
why might some rituals better fit that individual, and others better fit a group. And as you pointed out, sports is a fun way to explore that, because I definitely had the same thing where, without realizing it, I kind of created these little pre-race rituals for myself. I never thought I'm gonna create a pre-race ritual, and here's what I'm
Right.
gonna do.
Right.
It just started happening over time.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you could argue that because I wasn't kind of taking ownership of those, that they weren't really rituals. So I don't know. Again, that's a definitions issue, but I was doing them.
Right.
Like,
And
at the
if
end of the day,
something would have been weird if you didn't do them.
that's true. That's true. I had this one where every trip, for whatever reason, for like the first however many miles on the bus drive, I would put on my headphones and listen to Sting's album "Brand New Day," and just that's what I put on, and I would fall asleep generally, about 4 songs in, and then wake back up right on like the last couple of songs, without like, it was without fail. My body knew exactly when to come in and out of consciousness on this album. Um, and that's just how I started every cross country trip. I don't know why. It just was. Um, I think I did it once and it just kind of stuck. But there was never a thought of, this is going to be the best album for optimal performance or anything like that. But then, yeah, like you're saying, with the wider team rituals, we had our chant and everything. I don't think it's a problem to get totally fired up and ready to go. Like, I know Bryce kind of knocked on that a little bit. Like, he was all about kind of calming down. And
Well,
Bryce better than I, so I don't know if he was actually knocking on it, but
not so much of a knock, but I think his I think he was talking more about like the long sustained, like the night before you're gonna watch Rocky and you're gonna
right.
you're gonna listen to the heavy metal music all the way in, just because it's like the purpose of that race is not to get, especially for a distance race, you're not trying to get super fired up. You're actually trying to like chill out.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who's watched me race knows, has seen the effects of that, because
You're the perfect case study in Bryce's favor, actually.
Yes, because anytime I would just get so fired up on the line, and then the gun goes off, and everybody's like, "Is that a world record holder out there?" For about 200 yards, and they're like, "Nope, that's just a dummy. That's it."
You're like, hey, high school is over there. Yes, and I definitely think that the team chants, though, I loved those moments. That was my favorite part of any race, really.
But I think those were significant because, again, they and also I'm also thinking of the time after races where we would get together and pray.
Right.
Those were also really special. And in both cases, I think there was and I'll get now.
Except for the fact that we had to cool down to get there, and
Yes.
I did not like that.
Again, I use this word non-religiously, but sacramental. There's something that made those setting apart. We were setting that time apart, and dedicating it to God, and saying, we only were able to do this race because of God's grace to us, and thanking Him for that. That was one of the big blessings to me, especially on a day where, like, if a race went terrible, there was nothing better than the ritual of praying with the guys afterwards, because it always it was never about me at that point. It was like this great recentering of, like, this is about the team, this is about running for God's glory. We put it all out there, and we have to give it up to God at that point. And that was really healthy for me. That wasn't a practice before college for me to do with my team. So if anybody from the Covenant College team is listening, grateful for you guys.
Good times. Well, that about does it for our time today. This has been enjoyable. As a reminder, challenges last for 6 weeks. That's 42 days. They are simple daily tasks to grow us as men. And we've been talking about our current challenge, which is to engage in a form of ritual that connects you to the responsibility you have in your life. So I hope that folks continue to do well in that, and we will see you next week.
This has been the Forging Honor podcast. Music and production is by Elliot George. For more information about what we do or to learn how to get involved, visit our website at forginghonor.com.
If you enjoyed the show, make sure to like, subscribe, and give us a rating to bring others into the Forging Honor journey. On our website, you'll find information about our Patreon, articles, as well as links to the many resources we mentioned in the show.
Thanks for taking the time with us today. We hope you'll take up the work alongside us and join us in the task of Forging Honor. We'll see you next time.